Hi, everyone. How are you? I am very excited because today is a very special episode of the Vintage Meet Modern show. And we're going to be talking about all about how to shop for vintage. And I have an amazing guest here. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to have our guest join us. And I'm going to let her tell you a little bit about more about who she is, because for those of you who are asking that question, how do I even get started for shopping vintage? And how do I even find pieces online? I have the secret answer for you today. So I'm going to go ahead and I am going to welcome my special guest. We have the lovely and beautiful Liisa here joining us today from an app that I absolutely love. I just want to say that I am very guilty of getting lost scrolling through the app while I'm waiting in the carpool line to pick my children up.
Hi, everybody. Yeah.
Without further ado, Liisa, welcome to the Vintage Meet Modern Jewelry and Styling Show. I would love for you to introduce yourself to us and tell us a little more about who you are.
Well, thank you for having me, Veronica. It's my pleasure to tell you about my GEM app. So I am Liisa, last name Jokinen. And if you're wondering where my name comes from and where my accent comes from, that's Finland. So that's where I'm originally from. And I'm the founder of the GEM app that you mentioned earlier. And GEM, it's actually a search engine for all online vintage. So the thing is that it brings all online vintage into one search, so you can more easily find the items that you're looking for.
That is absolutely amazing. I don't even think people realize what a game changer it is to have an app for searching vintage in the online space, which is like the world's biggest shopping mall, basically. So tell me a little bit. So let's just move all the way back up to this before we even got to the app. What inspired you and why did you fall in love with vintage? Tell me a little bit about your history of even being connected to it.
Oh, yeah. So I think I've been in love with vintage and secondhand clothing since I was like a baby. Because I always wore like vintage clothing and secondhand, mostly like hand-me-downs from my big sister and my relatives when I was younger. And that's how I just fell in love with the aesthetics of older clothing items. And also I just loved like how old clothes felt on my skin, like worn soft cotton. It just felt so like soft and nice on my skin. And I remember how comforting it was to wear, like, for example, my mother's old clothes. So there was like this connection with me when I was wearing her old clothes. Like I was a super, super shy kid. So like going to school was always a kind of like too exciting for me. But when I was wearing like something from my big sister or from my mother, then it felt just like, I think, easier to be in this like school environment. So that's how I was introduced to old clothes. I always appreciated like vintage items, like anything old. And also growing up in Finland, I think any like sustainable lifestyle is really part of our culture. So it was all natural to me.
That's awesome. I think a lot of people can really appreciate that. I think that we forget how important sustainability has been part of other cultures other than the way that it is here in the US. I think that you raise a really good point that many people have been raised around it. So there's less of a stigma as to what secondhand and or vintage even means. But I do love that you brought up the fact that it was a confidence booster for you to wear something that was your mother's and your sister's. I know a lot of our listeners, people who are watching, who are joining us, I know that they feel the same way, a visceral connection to things that belong to people who they love from the past. So tell me how long you've worked in this industry for, because you are pretty well established as well as pretty well known in the fashion, especially the vintage fashion industry, even before the GEM app. So tell me a little bit about your background, how you turned this into a profession. What other things do you do other than run the app for John M, which by the way, we're going to have that in the show notes and as well as drop it in the comments. Everybody who's here is going to want to run and check it out. So please tell me a little bit about how you even got started in this industry.
Okay, so yeah, like I mentioned, I always been a fan of secondhand and vintage clothing, but I was never a vintage vendor or seller. So I was always, if I was shopping, I was shopping for myself. And I think big change was moving from Finland to the United States. Like soon 6 years ago, me and my husband, we moved to San Francisco first and then New York, where we are based. Although now I have to say I'm in Los Angeles. But anyway, New York is our home now in New York, in the United States. So moving here, I had to also like rethink my career and my, obsessions, my passions. And also I had more time in my hands. I used to work as a freelance writer and photographer in Finland. But moving away, I kind of like lost quite many of my contacts. I had to come up with something new, and well, vintage was always there. And moving here, I also discovered so many new stores, like amazing stores, both brick and mortar and online. And I realized how much great vintage there is, but it was impossible to follow all those stores, no matter how much I wanted or visit them all. So I wanted to bring them into one place, and that's how Gem was born. So I had the idea for something like this for years. Already in Finland, I was thinking like there should be some way to better connect people who are seeking for vintage item and the stores. And yeah, that's how it happened. And then 2-3 years ago, we started building the app. And so it's all done by me and my husband. Team of 2.
Okay, that and alone, I think everybody should give you a huge round of applause, because app development is like, that's incredible. We're not even talking about the simplicity of vintage sellers uploading their things to platforms or even developing a website. We're talking about you and your husband developing an app to make the vintage shopping experience accessible to everyone using the most modern piece of technology we all have, which is a cell phone. So that's absolutely incredible. So how long did it take you to develop the app?
So like I mentioned, I think we worked like full time, approximately 1 year, but we started developing it already earlier. So I can't really give you like exact estimate, but as soon as my husband quit his day job, he was working for Facebook. Okay. So then we started really like developing it. So it took around a year, approximately 1 year. And I felt like it was such a long time to wait and to finally, to show people that what we have built. Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about the app. Tell us about what the Gem app actually is. And so people who are just beginning to learn how to shop for vintage, tell us what it is at the most basic level.
So yeah, it's a search engine for online vintage. You could say that it's a Google for vintage, or an aggregator for vintage. So, and the way how it works, you type in anything that you are looking for. It can be a specific brand you are collecting, or it can be a color, or it can be a piece of vintage clothing item, like 70s bell bottoms. And then Gem shows you results from various marketplaces and online stores. So it's pretty simple actually, but there was nothing like this for resale or vintage secondhand market until now.
That's amazing.
And also there might be some store owners listening. So if they want to join, it's free to join. We don't take fees, and also it doesn't require any extra work from a store owner. So they can just email us and we can include them. And now you're probably wondering what is.
I can attest to that. I can attest that how I came across you was through an article that was talking about the best apps to learn about vintage. It wasn't even about that, and that's how I came across it. And for those of you who are listening and or just getting to know us, we do have our storefront listed through the Gem app, and I had somebody from my team, because I'm not techie, actually submit our information, and the process was seamless. It was easier, way easier than I thought. So for anybody who is a vintage seller who's looking, I can personally attest to the fact that it was really super easy. So let's talk about that next. Who is the app for? In your personal opinion, who is this app for?
So of course it's mostly, well, I hope that it's for everyone, let's say that. But of course, like our heavy users, let's put it that way, people who are like really into it at the moment are people who are already shopping vintage. So then it's easier for you to, you know, just shop via Gem, not on Etsy, for example. So anyone who is interested in vintage and secondhand clothing, anyone who wants to shop more sustainable, anyone who is okay to shop online, I think it's for everyone.
And then tell me, why an app? You could have built a database that was not an app friendly. Why did you choose to use the app format for it?
Well, just because we do so many things with our mobile phones nowadays, like shopping, stopping for flights, for example. That's like a good comparison actually how Gem works. So when you go online and you want to compare like flights that are available from Los Angeles to New York, so it's kind of the same thing. So yeah, we need to have an app nowadays. Yeah, that's why like Etsy has an app, so Gem is an app too. So you can do the searches both online or on app. So if you want to have like bigger photos, you can use the desktop version. And
I know I'm going to ask you a little bit about the desktop version when we talk about your blog, because I do love the desktop version myself. So you answered my question as to why an app, and I think that's 100% true. As somebody who both is a shopper of vintage myself, because obviously we sell vintage, but I'm also a vintage enthusiast and committed to the sustainable fashion movement myself, I find the app to be very user-friendly. And like I said, I am guilty of probably spending time getting lost down rabbit holes looking at all of the beautiful things. So let's talk a little bit about that. Do you have any tips for us on how to use the app?
I think there are like 3 basic ways how you can use the app. Of course, like the most straightforward and simple is that you type in what you're looking for and then you see the results. But I think that can also lead to your browsing. And I think that's what I really actually enjoy it. So I search like any piece or any brand designer that I love or color, and then it just leads me to discover new things. And one search usually leads to other ideas. I'm like, oh my God, yeah, I love anything pleated. Oh yeah, I love Mary McFadden. Let's see what there is. And then I will check like Mary McFadden dresses, for example. And the way Gem works is that you first see the exact results. So if I type in Mary McFadden dress, it shows dresses from Mary McFadden. And underneath, you can see other items from Mary McFadden. So it's like, okay, yeah, I love her dresses, but I do love her pants too. So it continues. And yeah, and I love the kind of like excitement and surprise moment of browsing on Gem. It's a bit similar to what you do when you enter a thrift store. You never know what you're actually going to see there. And it's the same thing with Gem. So although you know you're hunting for something specific, there's always this surprise moment, like what are you going to actually see on your screen? And I think that's super fun. So that's like, so those were like 2 ways to use the app, do a like specific search, or just browse and get inspired, and then you can save your favorite items and then get back to them later. Maybe use them as like kind of like your mood board, like Pinterest kind of mood board, and collect like your favorite looks and so on. And we recently also launched a new feature. It's called New Items Alerts. So if you don't quite find what you're looking for, you can set an email alert. So whenever somebody is listing something that you're looking for online, you will get an email alert. So then you can just lay back and wait until you hear the email. Click.
That's a real game changer we can talk about that. And I think that that's a real game changer for people who are vintage enthusiasts as both collectors of specific types of things, as well as vintage shoppers who are on the hunt to maybe find what they're looking for. So I think that's amazing. For me, one thing that I really do love about it and why I was so excited to have you on to talk about how easy it is actually to use is that, like, you just used the point of bringing up Pinterest. So you can create this curated style feed of items that you have hearted that might be inspired by a movie that you really loved, or maybe a particular decade that you really loved a lot. So I love that feature and that availability to see the things that I really like.
Well,
and it can even send me down, like you were saying, the rabbit hole of wanting to learn about more things, because you had mentioned, like, well, I really like Mary McFadden dresses, which is true. Who doesn't like Mary McFadden dresses?
Exactly.
And the pleats. But, you know, I mean, it wouldn't even occur to me to pull up the search at the same time to see the pants. So that's awesome and an amazing feature. So then you tell me a little bit more about that. In your words, what do you think really benefits the vintage shopper on the Gem app?
Well, what I like is that I usually want to think about my purchases like before I hit the shop button. So what I like is that I can get back to the items that I maybe found yesterday and think one more time, is this really like something that I actually want to buy? And is this something that I'm going to wear? And when you can do it at home, you can more easily see like, okay, what do I actually have in my wardrobe? Does this color go well with what my existing things and the style and so on? And maybe I already have like tens and tens of blouses, but I should be shopping more like skirts or something like that, which I forget when I'm like thrifting, because there is so much to see and I get lost somehow. But when I'm on at home, I feel like I'm more mindful when I shop, and that's, of course, it's a more sustainable option in that sense. So that although it's sustainable always because it's secondhand, but still it's better to think twice, I think, than just like aimlessly and just buy. New or old.
Honestly, you give me chills just talking about that. I know that sounds silly, but part of the reason why I started Vintage Meet Modern was because I wanted to raise awareness about the sustainability factor. I really wanted people to feel like they had an intentional shopping experience, that you could provide both things of luxury and distinction, and that would serve their need, but that it would be a reflection of different ways that they could use it and really make the most of it. So I love that you talk about the sustainability feature. How does the Gem app benefit vintage sellers?
So we, of course, hope that Gem will bring store owners more customers in the long run, and also new kinds of customers. And one really nice thing that I've heard from our users is that what they like about the app, that they are able to discover new stores when they are browsing on Gem, because you click like, okay, where is this item from? And they're like, oh, I never heard about this store. I love all what they have. And they maybe start following the store on Instagram or subscribe to their newsletter. So I think that's really nice to hear. Yeah.
This is such a game changer. It really is. It's such a game changer to have so many vintage stores or so many vintage places in one place for people in order to do some homework and research. So I really do. For everybody who's joining us, and even when you catch us on the replay, please check out the show notes. Please check out the links, because you're going to love this app. Okay, let's talk about what I absolutely love to talk about, which is shopping online for vintage. I'm such an enthusiast for it because even though I'm like you, I love the brick and mortar aspect of being able to touch and feel and look through things. But I actually fell in love with vintage shopping online because you can't usually walk into a brick and mortar store and say, I want a vintage statement ring without having to search through everything. So I'm very much a huge fan of being able to type in online a vintage statement ring, which I think is awesome that you can do on the Gem app. So tell us, in your feeling, what do you think the benefits of shopping online for vintage are?
Well, exactly. You already pointed it. One of the reasons that led to building Gem was that I was always trying to convince more people to, stop shopping fast fashion and go and choose something of better quality or secondhand. And then many people, especially if they had like careers, kids and so on, they were like super busy. They were like, yeah, but I don't have time to go thrifting because it takes so much time to find the piece that I'm looking for. So we try to make that easier for everyone. So you wouldn't have any excuse to go fast fashion shopping anymore. Yeah, so that's our big goal, to convince more people to totally quit fast fashion, shop more mindfully and choose secondhand, because yeah, we on Gem app you will hopefully find the item that you need, that you're looking for, and if not, we have the new items alerts which can help you too.
So that leads us to a very important question about raising awareness. And I'd love for you to tell me then, well, we're trying to debunk these myths related to, like you were saying, being too busy, just offering things out of convenience. Like I said, the app is mega convenient, very easy to navigate. The desktop is the same way. What kind of tips can you give us, 1 to 2, for people who are either intimidated to start shopping vintage, or maybe they have decided that they're ready to start vintage shopping, but they don't really know where to start? So give us a couple. You've worked in this industry for a long time and you're very passionate about it too. I want to hear what your tips are for getting started.
Tip number 1 would be to start with accessories, because then you don't need to worry about sizing. For example, jewelry. I mean, there is so much jewelry on Gem app. There is so much jewelry online anywhere, and in stores, brick and mortar stores too. And there is really no need to buy new jewelry. So that's easy.
I couldn't agree more. But and I might add that it always fits too. So if you don't have
exactly, yeah,
and it'll last for another 50 or 100 years if you take care of it. So yeah. That's a great tip. Do you have any tips for people who are beginning to research what they want online when they're making a vintage purchase? Like, what kind of things would they want to be looking for, like in product descriptions or when they're typing things into the search bar?
Well, of course, you need to be careful with measurements. So my tip is to take your measurements, be honest with yourself, and then write the measurements down on your phone, for example, so that you always have them with you, no matter where you go. And quite soon you will memorize them, and you already know, like, okay, this is my waist. So that's the way to find the items that fit you. Then secondly, I would look for materials that are easy to take care of, like natural materials, cotton, for example, that's easy to take care of. Silk, not so much, because you need to hand wash. It takes more time and effort to really take good care of silk items. Maybe avoid items that need dry cleaning, because that's not so environmentally friendly. What else? And then I would just go and follow your heart. You know, if you love something, then buy it. Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, no, I love that quote from Audrey Hepburn, where she always says that happiest girls are the prettiest girls, which I couldn't agree more. I think if your heart speaks to it, or if the memory of something speaks to you, it's probably meant to be with you. I always tell people the same thing. Follow your intuition. If you love it, it's meant to be for you. And I also think that in the vintage world, that if you miss out on something, spend a little more time looking at other things, because there is something meant to you, meant for you. So speaking of that, though, I mean, I think that these are all great tips and tricks that you're talking about for customers who might be just getting started. And so I think that also goes hand in hand with what kind of tips you might say to vintage sellers. What kind of tips and tricks, if people are either just getting started, or maybe if they're looking to have greater success presenting their items online through an app like yours, what kind of suggestions would you give to them?
Well, this is something that I always tell to anyone, no matter like what they are doing. It's the same thing, like follow your heart. Don't try to imitate others too much. You can look others for example, but I think it's always super fun if a store finds their own like aesthetic and style. the way they photograph items, so that I immediately know that, hey, this is from this and that store. I think it adds so much personality to the store, and it's a way of branding and standing out. So that's my number one. And then, of course, when you photograph items, just take care that there is like good lighting and the photographs are sharp enough. And sometimes an item, it photographs well just like on a hanger. You don't need to model it on anyone. It may be even like even better just to put it on a hanger. So if it's like a simple garment, I guess that's it. And yeah, and when you do like listings, try to think the words that would lead people to this item. Like if you type in the fancy dress, well, maybe there is someone who like wants to search for a fancy dress, but it's most likely that somebody is looking for pink 50s dress or 80s prom dress, ruffles and peplum, for example. So try to type in everything, any detail that makes the item specific, that might help people to find the piece in your listings.
Those are all excellent tips. And I like to be able to share the tips that you would give to buyers for sellers. But I also think that when buyers are listening and we're talking about what kind of things that sellers are trying to do also, I think it's important for them also, it builds like a know, like, and trust with the sellers, being able to present items in a clear way with the photos and things like that, because it's what buyers are looking for. And I think sellers, it's a nice checklist to remember how that we want to promote our products so that we can get them into more vintage and sustainable fashion enthusiasts and fans and supporters too. So speaking of that, one thing that I absolutely love about the GEM app actually is the blog. It's honestly,
thank you.
As great as the resources of being able to scroll through and search things. Tell me about the blog, because the blog is an amazing resource in itself, besides having this amazing database of items.
Yeah. So after meeting like several vintage vendors, when we started building the GEM app, I just very soon I discovered like how much the vendors know about things. Like you are like walking encyclopedias of vintage fashion. And I was like, yeah, this needs to be like documented somewhere. And maybe vendors don't often have time, or maybe they don't have, time to run a blog themselves. So it's fun to show their expertise on blog and share all their knowledge and all the tips that they have about wearing and shopping vintage. So we have on our blog all kinds of stories about vintage clothing. We have travel stories, for example. We've been now several weeks in Los Angeles. You can expect more tips for LA vintage shopping in the future. Then we have shared some like laundry and maintenance and mending tips so that people would learn how to take better care of their items. And then I love to also share like general style inspiration. For example, here in Los Angeles, I met Ari Seth Cohen, who runs the Advanced Style blog. If you don't know it, you need to check it out. And he has amazing style himself. He was actually the first person that I wanted to meet when when I arrived in Los Angeles. So I want to share just inspiration, like how to wear vintage, how to build your outfits. And there is endless amount of topics that I could discuss on the blog. And I'm happy to hear, like, if anyone has any tips or ideas, or if you want to hear about something specific, let me know.
Well, I'm hoping that we can actually do something with you. So we'll be in touch over that.
Cool.
I did.
Yeah.
So when I had titled this and I was talking about it, that's what I was talking about, is we get so frequently asked, like, how do I start a collection? How do I shop for vintage? Where do I shop for vintage online? And it does have some really great conversations that get started. But I was so glad to see that in addition to the app, you had the blog feature because the blog can answer many of those questions that people are searching for the knowledge or the specifics to. Plus, there's all kinds of great imagery with all kinds of inspiration, like you were talking about also. So for those of you who are joining us or who also are catching this on the replay, I want to remind all of you that that's an incredible resource besides the searchability factor for actually finding pieces that, you know, for example, the mending article that you just mentioned. I think some people might be intimidated again by saying, well, I don't want to buy something that's vintage and maybe it has a hole or a tear, or maybe I have something that's vintage that has now developed a hole or a tear. It's a great resource for people to realize that those mending tips and tricks are out there without having to either discard it or leave it sitting in your closet unused because you didn't take the time to repair it. So I think that's such an important point to bring up. So now you are a vintage enthusiast yourself. You were never a seller, but you have definitely been a collector. So tell us a little bit about what you personally love and what you personally collect.
I think at the moment I'm actually not collecting anything because I've been traveling so much. So I basically have just one suitcase. So I can't even shop. But yes, so not collecting too much, but I love many things. I love bright colors. I was wondering if you would ask about my jewelry obsessions, because I'm not a jewelry person, but I love plastic jewelry because of the bright colors. That's what I've always loved. And I used to collect a little bit like all kinds of plastic jewelry, and I have the stash still in Helsinki, Finland, but I don't have any of that with me here in the States. Yes, so I love bright colors. I love Japanese designers. I love Kom. I love Miyake, and I love Marciela for his intelligence. Coming from Finland, I love Marimekko, both vintage and new, and that's something that I used to collect. So whenever I would see a vintage Marimekko piece, I would buy it when I was still living in Finland. And I used to also collect Vuokko. Vuokko was actually the first hired fashion designer inside Marimekko. So she started designing for Marimekko in the 50s, but pretty soon launched her own label called Vuokko. It's spelled Vuokko, Vuokko. And he is turning 90 years this year, and he still designs. And I love anything that he does. It's amazing. You can find some Vuokko pieces on Gem too. So those are some things that I used to collect. Yeah. And I love anything with flowers, floral prints I love, and I love ruffles. But I love to mix and match like vintage with something more contemporary.
Yeah, well, I'm obviously all about that. I like being able to have the ability to mix and match the vintage with the modern. So I think that's awesome. So you did say, you did get to meet a celebrity from Advanced Style, but tell us, you got to give us the dish here. Tell us if you have any amazing stories that are related to vintage. I mean, it could be anything from the one that got away, or the one that you can't believe you found, or the person that you can't believe you met. So inspire us with something that you hold near and dear to your heart that's related to vintage, a great story.
Okay, I feel like the greatest inspiration for me, actually, most people in Finland, they know me as a street style photographer. I launched my Hell Looks street style blog in 2005, and that has been like my fashion magazine kind of. So it's more inspirational for me than reading Vogue magazine, meeting those people. And then I have another blog now in New York, and it's called NYC Looks. Yeah. And I went back to New York for the Fashion Week to shoot street style for the Cut magazine. And I don't know. I think the best outfits that I photograph are always a mix of contemporary and vintage. There is always the vintage element in those outfits.
Wow, that's being a street style photographer, that must be very exciting and a very keen eye for detail, I'm sure.
It's the best thing that I've ever done besides Gem app, because I get to meet so many nice people, and I have an excuse to stop them in the street, and I can ask like, what are you wearing and why are you wearing the things that you are wearing?
Did you say you were shy growing up?
Yes, yes, I did. Yes. But luckily it changed. But I can tell you, it was not easy to take the first photos when we started taking them, me and my husband in Helsinki 2005, because there was no Instagram.
Yes.
There were no selfies. The selfie didn't exist. People didn't understand why I wanted to take their photo, so I had to explain. And when I was taking the first photos, I didn't have the website up because I didn't have any photos yet.
No.
So it was tough trying to explain the concept and to get the photo. But people have been like super open. So usually people love to be photographed.
Well, I do. I think that opens up a gateway to expression for many people. I personally myself always shy away from having my photo taken. But when someone compliments you on your style or wants to know more about it, since I'm somebody who wears vintage too, and often does get stopped, like, where did you get that from? There's a different kind of confidence and connection that opens up when somebody either pays you a compliment or tells you that they've taken notice of something that you have. So yeah. I love the fact that you start these relationships and conversations with people, and people who are from all over the world and people that you don't know, which is amazing. So
yeah, it's fun.
So as we're winding down here, tell me a little bit about, what do you want the world to know about your mission?
Well, I guess my mission, it was already mentioned, but I want to encourage more people to shop more mindfully and more sustainable, choose secondhand first and new only when you really need it. Yeah. And when you buy new things, I want people to choose better quality, because we also need to have future vintage.
Yes, I couldn't agree with that more. That's why when I tell people about following your heart with what you invest in, being intentional about it, it is okay to buy new. There are certain things that we do need to buy new, and there are certain things that may fit your lifestyle better that are new too, but invest in something that's going to last and something that you're not going to grow tired of. And if you are going to grow tired of it, make sure it's something that you can pass on to someone else because of that. So yeah, I am fully supporting of that mission. So
yeah, and I need to add that I think when you choose something that you really love, you automatically start to take better care of the item, and you are ready to repair it, ready to mend it, ready to invest the time and effort, in like storaging your winter jacket properly and so on. So
yeah, I bet we can get tips on how to take better care of things on the GEM app, right? On the blog. Well, it has been so awesome talking to you. I felt so honored that you would take time out of your busy schedule to tell us all about this resource, because it really truly is an incredible one, and it's so user friendly. It's such a game changer for people who are looking to either shop vintage, learn about vintage, all of the above, be part of the more sustainable fashion movement. So tell us, how do we stay in touch with you?
So you can go online. Our website is gem.app, gem.app, and you can find me there. You can follow us on Instagram. Handle is gem.search, and you can feel free to DM me or email me if you have any questions or comments or any like wishes regarding the future blog posts. I'm happy to answer. And I guess those are the most important channels how to follow me. Yeah. And my street style page too. Maybe you can add it to your show notes.
Absolutely.
Lovely.
The photos are absolutely lovely, and they're also very inspiring. I always remind people that street style is even a little bit different when you're talking about the photography aspect of it, because these are real people. It's like, it is honestly like real people, real time. It's even different than like Instagram. I mean, people may be being very intentional with their style because they like using it as a form of expression, but street style photography is so special. So yeah, we will definitely link that for people to follow you. And I couldn't agree also, for those of you who are on Instagram, which if you're scrolling through an app, you're probably on Instagram too. Your Instagram is always great. And I know that there's always links to blog posts and even things that are being newly featured I see in the stories. So I know that a lot of our followers We have so many supporters of people who obviously love vintage who already follow us. But for those of you who might be just joining us or who are catching this on the replay or reading the show notes or anything, remember, these are all great tips and tricks in order to be able to help you truly have the wardrobe lifestyle of your dreams, living more sustainably, more fashionably, and more intentionally. So truly, it has been an honor getting to know you. I plan on staying in touch with you. I know you're very friendly and very kind. And I look forward to seeing the way that the app is going to grow and continue to be such a game changer for so many different people.
Hey, thank you for having me. This is so fun. Yeah.
Oh, I'm so glad that we got to do this. So thank you so much for being here. For those of you who have joined us today, I know Jennifer was here, Sabrina was here. We had quite a few other people who were joining us during the live show. Please head on over and take a look at the GEM app. Otherwise, I want to tell all of you to take time to celebrate your inner sparkle so you can truly let your personal style shine. Together, we make the world a more beautiful place everywhere we go. So celebrating that with all of you. I'm Veronica Stout. This is Liisa. And we will look forward to seeing you all again real soon. Have a great afternoon.
Thank you for having me. Bye-bye.